All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. If you're watching live or if you are joining us with the recording, that's great. Feel free at any time, of course, to ask questions. Week two of the Orienta Malabrigo knit along. This is a really fun shawl with a lot of really interesting characteristics to it. If you're a part of the Facebook group or on the blog or watch through YouTube, there are so many ways to be involved in this community and ask questions. I have noticed that there have been, Rachel popped into the chat, there have been some frogging. There's been frogging of lace. If you don't know what the term frog is, it means to rip out because you rip it, rip it, rip it, rip it. I had been knitting for many years before I realized that that's why it was called frogging. But yeah, rip it, rip it. Sounds like a frog. So, we're definitely going to be going over lace today. We're definitely going to be going over how to tink back because we're removing a stitch, removing stitch marker. We're shifting things on every right side row, especially in the garter. You're removing that stitch marker. And so we have to make allowances for that when we shift back. And I'm also going to cover a lot of what we're actually looking at in this fabric. So last week, if you watch, we talked about kind of the three different foundational fabrics in knitting. You have garter, you have stockinette, and then you have a knit purl alternate within a row. This pattern does alternate between garter fabric and stockinette. The stockinette is the lace where you're doing knit based stitches on the right side and you're purling on the wrong side. So it does create different stitches specifically within those decrease, that midline stitch. So, a big thing that I've learned in my professional teaching of knitting, instructing, knitting instruction, is that we all tend to be as knitters, when we have a pattern in our hand, we tend to be so locked into the pattern, meaning the words. And we don't give enough honor, really, and focus to what we're creating in our hands. And so, if you've taken an online class with me before, you may have heard this analogy where I give about if you're making chocolate chip cookies and you have the recipe. And even if you've made chocolate chip cookies, 100 times before, you have the recipe in front of you, you get distracted. Something happens. The doorbell rings. You have to go to the bathroom. The dog starts eating something he or she shouldn't be eating. Your significant other can't find the mayonnaise in the fridge, although it's been in the same place for 3 years. Not speaking from experience. Anyway, you get distracted. And rather than put into your mixture a cup of sugar, which the recipe calls for, you accidentally put in a cup of salt. You don't realize it until you bake your cookies, they come out of the oven, you taste them, and they taste horrible. If you look at the recipe still says a cup of sugar. The recipe does not tell you your mistake. The recipe doesn't tell you anything other than what you can choose to follow within the written words. Knitting is exactly the same thing. Excuse me. We're having massive weather changes up here in Detroit, and my allergies are going absolutely bonkers. Yesterday was beautiful, almost 80 degrees, and today it's almost freezing and raining. I don't know what's going on. So I apologize for my voice. So the point of that kind of analogy is and what we're going to focus a lot on today is reading our knitting, looking at the architecture of the stitches and understanding how they work, how and why they work. This is a personal example here. I'll make it real short. I'm pretty math oriented, and when I remember being in middle school taking my algebra class, do not worry, I'm not going to make any of you do algebra. But I was given a formula and told by my teacher, just do this. Just plug this in, it'll work every time. Well, when I plugged it in and I did it right, yes, it worked every time. But did I know what the hell I was doing? No. It was only until I understood why balancing an equation works, how filling in for a variable or whatever it is. How that formula worked was when I was able to fix mistakes, realize what I've done correctly, what I've done incorrectly. Again, knitting is the same thing. We're focusing a little bit too much on those abbreviations and not so much on the beautiful art that we are creating in our hands. So with that, let me go ahead and change my spotlight. I have a few different swatches to show. You know, last week, Carol, I had a better math teacher. Good. Not to knock on my math. I don't want to knock on anybody here, but yeah. Okay. So in this pattern, we have two centerline decreases. In the garter section, we have that slip one, knit two together, pass the slip stitch over. And then we still have that in the lace section, but we incorporate one other decrease, which is a slip two knitwise, knit one, pass those two slip stitches over. I want to make it very clear that the S2KP, so the decrease that's introduced in on row 3 of the lace section, that is the same as a center double decrease. It's the exact same stitch, it's just written differently. So tomato, tomato, whatever you choose to call it, it is the exact same stitch. So there was a little bit of confusion of the CDD, center double decrease, versus the decrease that's listed on row 3. They're the same. So we're going to go over that today and how they look different. How the row 1 and row 3 stitches on the center decrease look different. Okay. So here are some swatches. And I'm going to point out specifically what to look for as you're doing these stitches. You know, you can watch YouTube videos, you can watch the videos that I've created, you can look online, whatever works best for you in order to know how to do the stitch appropriately or correctly. But if you don't know what to look for, you kind of don't know if you're doing the stitch correctly. So this is a garter. Yes, I will knit a few rows. So this is the start of our shawl. This is garter fabric, so we're knitting the right side, knitting the wrong side, and we're always doing our decreases over the 3 stitches before our marker. Now, what to look for in that decrease stitch? And again, this is the first one that we encounter, the SK2P. This is the one that's used pretty much primarily throughout the piece. So when you do the slip 1, knit 2 together, pass the slip stitch over, you end up getting a little hug. So it's right here. The bar, we slip the stitch purlwise, which keeps the stitch in a normal position. And then when we bind it off, we get this little hug around this knit 2 together stitches that we did. Now, kind of the beauty of this stitch is that a knit 2 together is a right leaning stitch. So let me go ahead and just demonstrate this for you. Sticking within the pattern, starting with our increase. I'm knitting to 3 stitches before the marker. So again, this is the SK2P. So I slip purlwise. When you slip purlwise, it keeps the foundation of a normal stitch. So if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about here, a normal stitch looks like this, where you have the legs, they are called legs. The legs of this loop, the front leg is in the front of the work and the back leg is in the back of the work. Sort of like when you're walking, like the first leg steps forward first. This is a twisted stitch or a backwards stitch. Okay, my yarn's splitting now.
Sorry, it's not a twisted stitch, it's an Easter mount stitch.
Okay, thank you.
No
It
way.
creates a twisted stitch when you knit it, but yes, you're right. And it's technically backwards on the needle here. So when we're looking at this loop, this is not what we want for for this project. We don't want the back leg to be the first in line. So when you slip, why this matters, when you slip purlwise, you're keeping the integrity of the stitch in the order that it needs to go. And then you knit two together. And then when you pass this slip stitch over, it doesn't twist the stitch. It lays it nicely on top of the knit stitch. Now I'm stopping here so that you can see the cool thing about this decrease. It takes away two stitches because you knit two together, or you knit two together here, takes away one. You're passing the slip stitch over, takes away another. The knit two together is a right leaning stitch. The passover leans left. So you get a really pretty X. It's subtle, but it's pretty as you go through the piece. So then you drop, knit, and continue on. So it's a little bit harder to see in the garter, which is why I created a stockinette. So here's what it looks like. The curved tool I'm using is just a cable needle, but it's nice to point with. So in stockinette, where you have your V stitches very clearly laid out, you don't have the bumps from when you do those garter stitches. The hugs, you can see, yes, Carol, it really lines up. And you can also kind of see the rows here. So here's the right side hugging this stitch, and here's the wrong side purling that stitch that was hugged. Here's the right side, and you can see that little X right there, and then the wrong side. So gives you a little bit better view of how the architecture or the anatomy of that stitch works. It also helps you anticipate and see if you're within the right line or the correct line here, understanding that you have three stitches and that these two are going to be knit together. This one's going to be passed over right here. Before I even get there in the row, I can see how it's going to lie, how it's going to work, and that I am in the correct midline space. Okay, so this is the decrease that is used in the pattern for primarily the whole pattern, except for when we get to row 3 of the lace. I love how knitting has so many exceptions. We just roll with it. That's what we do. Okay, so starting with garter, this is again, the row 3, which is the S2KP or the CDD, if you're more familiar with that. Here's what it looks like in garter, which again, you don't see it in garter in this pattern, but for the sake of the instruction, when you have a slip 2, we're slipping knitwise as opposed to purlwise. And then we're knitting one stitch. We're knitting one stitch, and then we're picking up those two slip stitches and placing them on top of that one knit stitch. Now, remember that X that I talked about, where in the previous decrease, you lean to the right and then lean to the left? This CDD stitch or S2KP stitch, it doesn't lean at all. And that's the biggest difference between these two stitches as far as if we talk about form and function. So the function of both of these stitches is to keep a midline and to take away two stitches off of our stitch count. It's a 2-stitch decrease. That's the function of it. The form of it is very different. Again, the first one has the X, this one does not. When we go to knit both of these stitches together, it does give them a little overlap there. And then when you knit, we just slipped it. We didn't knit them, we just slipped them. And then when you knit the one stitch, that is a normal knit stitch. And then when you pick up those two slipped stitches together, what it does is it lays them down on top of each other as a normal knit stitch, like that. So it goes straight up and down, and you can see the V. Just to make sure I don't get off on my count, I want to make sure I do my whole stitch marker thing here. Let me show you what it looks like on stockinette. So this is what you will see on row 3 because we do this decrease on the stockinette fabric of the lace. It's much different. You can very clearly see that center midline with those little V's in their kind of vertical position. So between, oh, all my cords, all my cords. I need 3. I need another arm here. Okay, so between these different stitches, you can see the first one, the row 1 decrease has the hug. The row 2 decrease does not. It goes up and down. This is how you get, and again, this is not my design. As a design, I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is how you get the look of this lace detail. You have that first row 1 hugging the stitch. You have row 3 keeping it straight up and down. And so, as a designer, and I'm teaching a shawl design class, actually, a workshop at the end of the month, and I talk about this a lot, is form and function. What do we want the stitches to do? And how do we want them to look? And again, for those of you that see this puckering, I have not blocked this because there have been questions about puckering, and I wanted you to see that this lace section does pucker, but it will block out. So you don't need to be alarmed if you see that within your own work. So I assume we could reach out to Corey and ask her what she was thinking in regards to this. But as it's called the lattice lace section, this looks, if you've ever seen like a lattice in the garden where the wood panels overlap, that's what this looks like. Very much so. And so she chose, I think, to not use this same decrease right here in order to get a very continuous look. Now, that being said, we are the makers of our own piece. Yes, we are using the pattern. Yes, we're using the recipes, but just like those chocolate chip cookies, if you want to add walnuts to your chocolate chip cookies, even though the recipe doesn't call for it, you can do so. It's okay. So if you don't want to go back and forth, if it's too confusing to go back and forth between those two decreases, the row 1 or the row 3, excuse me, choose one. All you have to do is make sure that it is a 2-stitch decrease. The 2-stitch, yes, Hen, BYOD, be your own designer. The 2-stitch decrease is what keeps your midline where it's supposed to be. It's not necessarily one decrease or the other, like the S2 or the SK2P or the CDD. That's just for the look. So honestly, if you wanted to just choose a knit 3 together, you could do that as well, as long as you stay within the confines of how the pattern is growing, the shape and the structure. So how does that sit? Do we have questions in the Kathy, great question for slipping them together. You do want to slip them together. Let me get to a swatch that works here. Okay. I'm going to undo in order to show this. So this is, let's take a little bird walk here. I'm going to answer your question and first show you what tinking looks like. Okay. So wait, this is not the right one, is it? Huh. Never mind. I'll just use this one. Did I purl back? I didn't purl. Okay. We'll just go with this one. So this is going to show that CDD, when you are tinking, so if you get to the end of your row and you realize, okay, I forgot to move my stitch marker the appropriate way, or I did the wrong decrease, and you want it to be pulled back and you don't want to have to rip. Here's how you undo. So you're going to tink as normal, but just as you removed the marker, as you're going forward in your work, you have to remove the marker to undo. So this is another area and then put it back. So this is another area where I've seen people say my count was correct or my midline was correct, and then I tinked and then all of a sudden it's not correct anymore. Possibly because you didn't do the backwards removal of the marker. So now here's that center decrease to the question of slipping. 3 stitches, 1, 2, and 3. When you slip one by one, like this and like this, it can still work when you pass it over. I prefer to slip them together because what you're doing is you're acknowledging that this stitch, it's kind of more of a mental thing. You're acknowledging that this stitch is in front of that one. So similar to when you do a knit two together, you want to have those stitches together. And you can see they kind of overlap on the needle. And then when you knit the stitch, you can very easily pick them up. And you do want to pick them up together. And then lay them down, pass them over to lay very nicely on top. And when you look at this stitch up close, and if I zoom in too far, I'll get a little fuzzy. That's why I try to use a neutral yarn here. You can see the 2 stitches that were passed over. This one and this one. That second stitch, I just pulled it out to emphasize it. It lays behind that first stitch. So when you're looking at your, like if you're thinking about you had 1, 2, 3 stitches, this stitch right here is the very first stitch that was on the needle. Oops. Okay, I'm seeing. And that's what I just, yes, Kathy. Kathy, I hope that made sense. Um, when doing this, Tony, when doing the CDD on the right side, when you're working with the wrong side, how can you tell which stitch you need to purl? Well, this kind of, Tony, to this question, um, it depends on if you're choosing to follow the pattern or kind of doing it your own way. So when you're working in that garter section of this pattern, you are always doing if you're choosing to, you're doing the first decrease. So the same decrease you see in one row, row 1 of the lace. So the SK2P. Now, if you're in this garter section, you're also knitting the back side. So you're knitting all the way across, you're knitting all the way across the wrong side. Now, in the lace, as it's stockinette, you don't have to know which stitch to purl because as you knit the right side with your yarn overs and stitches, you're just purling all the stitches in the back. Now, assuming that you want to have this kind of a look, going all the way up, which I noticed on the Facebook page, there were some people that did that. Even in the garter section, you want to have that kind of straight midline look. That's when you do need to be aware of your stitch, which one it is. So using that example I just did, I have garter fabric. I did my CDD stitch here. I removed my marker, knit one, put my marker back. Pay attention, again, reading your fabric here. That CDD stitch is the second stitch on this side of the marker. And so, like Rhonda is saying, she used CDD throughout. That's totally fine. You can do that. And if you want that CDD to really make a vertical visual emphasis, you do need to purl it. So I'm going back on my wrong side. And this is the garter section. So I'm knitting. I get to my marker. That's kind of my stop sign. I knit one stitch after the marker, and then this is my CDD stitch. You can check it a few different ways. You can kind of do exactly what I'm doing, twist your wrist so you're looking at the front side to see that vertical stitch right there. You can also investigate. You really only need to do this once because then you'll know what to look for. You can investigate the bump on the below. This is the previous stitch. This is what you did on the right side. You can look at it, kind of take it apart and see like, whoa, I have two bits of yarn there. That's where the passover happened. So then you can bring your yarn to the front, purl it, and knit the rest of your row in the garter. So the point of showing this is you will get a slightly different look in the garter section of your shawl. You will have, instead of these stitches that have the little passover hug, you will have this as your midline. So imagine this is all garter, and then this would be your midline going all the way up like that, which some people prefer. Totally up to you. How do you know where to put the marker back if you forget? So a couple ways to pay attention to that. One is that this is a little bit brighter here. You're always going to have, so I'm looking at the right side. You're always going to have 3 extra stitches to the physical right of the marker. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's my marker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's my 3 extra stitches. And I'm showing you this to show like there's the extra. The extra actually is the reason why we're paying attention to those 3 extra stitches is because you want those 3 stitches to be before the marker. If for some reason the marker falls off or you're tinking and you forget to remove the marker and put it back in the appropriate place, another way to pay attention to this is if you hold your midline, like again, reading your fabric, this is why it's so important. Looking at where that little hug stitch is, and this is that garter decrease in following the pattern, so the SK2P, the one that you're doing pretty much the whole way except for in the row 3 of lace. Look for where that hug is. That hug is going to be, you're going to see it visually on the middle of the 3 stitches. So if you're following up the midline and you're wondering where to put your stitch marker, look at the midline, look at that hug, notice that stitch right there on the marker or on the needle. One to the right, one to the left. That's where your marker goes. And then you can safe shoot yourself or do troubleshoot yourself. That's what I want to say. By counting your stitches, making sure you have 3 to the physical right of your marker. Help on the lifeline. Rhonda, I use CDDs throughout, knit the, yep. So Rhonda mentioned, I'll come back to the lifeline in a moment. Using the CDD decrease throughout gives you this look right here. So garter, it just gives you kind of an accentuated garter bump right there. It's subtle, but it's pretty. So Lifeline. We talked a little bit about Lifeline last week, but I recognize that this question was not putting it in actually how to go ahead and work with it. So when you have a Lifeline, when you put it in, refer back to the video of last week where we use a tapestry needle, go onto the cord of your needle, and you just literally weave it in. You put it through the stitch. I'm using a cord here, but you can use a scrap yarn that is of similar weight to what you're using. What you don't want to do is go through your stitch marker. So as you are putting your lifeline in, you want to make sure to go around the stitch marker. Now, you want to make sure, yay, Sharon. You want to make sure that, just use other needles here. When you go to knit your first stitch, so pretend I'm on needles here, pretend this is a needle. When you go into the stitch, you don't want to pick up your lifeline. So you want to make sure you're getting the actual stitch without picking up this lifeline. Now, if you frog back, kind of like how it is right now, if you made a mistake and you bring it down to your lifeline, this is what it's going to look like. If you're using one of these cords that has a hole at the end of it, all you need to do, I'm going to grab another pair of needles here. I have like 14 needles around me. I love it. I love it. Okay, this will work. These are my great grandmother's old needles. She's an expert knitter, came over from Finland. So if you have one of these cords that has a hole at the end of it, all you need to do is put that cord, the hole, onto your needle like this. And then you can very carefully put the stitches back on your needle like that. Take out the cord and you're ready to go. If you're using a piece of scrap yarn that doesn't have this fancy dancy little hole in there, what you're going to do is literally move each stitch back onto the needle. You're going to do this purlwise. So making sure you pick up each stitch. And then if it feels tight because you have that yarn in there, you just take it out as you go. But you do want to go by stitch by stitch. So these cords are a little bit of an investment, but I like them. They're really, really good to use. Make sure I'm not missing any other questions.
Jill?
Okay.
Can I keep
Yes.
going on that lifeline, please?
Yes.
Keep going on that lifeline.
That's
where I'm stuck at.
Putting the stitches back on the needle?
Yeah. And then
So you put it on each stitch.
sorry.
No,
I
fine.
emailed you and I didn't get a response.
Well, if it was right before the knit along, you wouldn't
No,
have.
I know, I'm sorry.
So you put it on each stitch like this. The yarn overs are a little tricky because they are tight. And then all you need to do, whether it's yarn or a cord, you just pull it out.
So you take the lifeline back out?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't do that part. Okay.
I mean, you don't need to. You can leave it in, but like I showed you, it does start to feel a little bit tight when you put it back on the needle just due to the tension of like the circumference of the stitch. But yeah, you pull out the lifeline, just yank it out. All your live stitches are safely on the needle. And then you can either put it back in where you are, or you can knit a few more rows up and put it in wherever you want.
Yeah, because I'm stuck at 45 stitches.
Can
Okay.
I suggest something that would be easier?
Sure.
I usually don't put in lifelines through rows that I haven't purled through. So where
Yeah.
there's yarn overs, we tend to like lose them. So it's harder to put lifelines through that, like afterthought lines, right? So purl first, I would recommend, and then um go through your stitches because they're all going to be just knit stitches, no yarn overs.
To clarify, to kind of build upon that, these yarn overs, the property of a yarn over is that it's not closed. It's not a closed stitch. And so it's a great, and I agree, suggestion is that you work, and I'm not following the pattern here, I'm not doing my increases. When you get to a yarn over, like a double yarn over there. So when you get to a yarn over, you can see that it's easy, even if you don't have a lifeline, it's super easy to drop. If you do have a lifeline in there, it'll get very tight. It's not a closed stitch. It's not being held by anything. So working the purl row closes the stitch. It secures the yarn over as a stitch within the row. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Is the ratio the same on the right side versus the wrong side? Sharon, you're referring to the ratio of the stitch counts, I'm assuming. So in this pattern, when looking at the right side, you're always going to have 3 extra stitches to the right of the stitch marker than on the left. The reason why you want to do this looking at the right side is because, hey, I am going to make you do some algebra today. Here we go. We're increasing here on the right side. We're adding a stitch and we're adding a stitch at the end too, right here and right here. We're taking away 2 stitches in the middle, and so we break even. So if you're counting your stitches at the beginning of your right side row and at the end of the right side row, they're going to be exactly the same. When you turn your work over on the wrong side, this is where the growth of the shawl occurs. You're increasing at the end, beginning of the wrong side and at the end of the wrong side. And so this is why we want to count our stitches looking at the right side, about to work a right side. Um, Cat, it's okay to start with week 2, correct? Kathy, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I think we covered those.
I was using the center double decrease throughout, and I slipped the stitches individually and I didn't purl on the other side. And so I'm wondering whether to start over or just like how different it will look if I just start week 2 doing it the correct way. And can I live with that?
Again, totally up to you. It's what you can live with. I've seen like 3 different things where people have said they're perfectionists, which is fun. I'd love to touch upon that. Yeah, if you do the CDD throughout, if you're knitting across, you'll just get that little center bump and you know what to look for. If you decide to purl that stitch, you will get the kind of ribbed V's, vertical going up. Design feature, totally up to you on how you want it to look.
Thank you. I do have more clarity now.
Okay, good. I'm glad. So with the lace, I've had a few questions in regards to stitch counts. Hannah, if you could just make sure I'm not missing anything super important here. A
I
barber
think we're
cord.
fine for now.
Okay. So let me clear the decks. I've had some questions in regards to the stitch count, the midline on the lace. Now this is not, so I'm not really going to focus on the decrease. I've already, I spent time at the beginning. If you're just joining, I've seen some people pop in and out. So if you're just joining, I'm not going to, at the beginning of the video, I spent a lot of time on the decreases. Now let's talk about actually reading the lace and what it's supposed to look like. Some questions I've gotten are, my stitch count is the same or where it should be, but my midline is off, or my stitch count is off, but my midline is correct. So the double-edged sword of lace is that it's beautiful and those eyelets can throw you off. So looking at the pattern, we have a repeat in both row 1 and row 3 of a yarn over SSK or a knit two together yarn over. I'm going to show you kind of where those mistakes can possibly happen. We are in a very good muscle memory right here. I think before the first lace section, we're in a good muscle memory of doing an increase, double decrease, increase, turn our work, increase, increase. So now we're throwing in yarn overs, which are an increase. We're doing an SSK, which is a left-leaning decrease over here. We're doing a knit two together, which is a right-leaning decrease over here. The reason why your stitch count stays the same is because when you combine a yarn over, which is +1, and an SSK, which is a -1, you even out. So your stitch count still relies on the wrong side, knit front and back at the beginning, knit front and back at the end. It's easy to forget those in this section. I did it a bunch of times. The other thing in kind of reading your stitches that you want to look for is if you're following the decreases of row 1 versus row 3 being different, this is what it will look like after one go through of the lattice lace section. So to clarify, we have a setup of row 1 and row 2 where you're just doing like a little stockinette setup in there. But then the lattice lace section is at the top of that pattern page. If you're reading the Malabrigo pattern in the way that it was laid out. Row 1 through 4 is what you're repeating. You're not repeating the setup again. You're just repeating rows 1 through 4. Here's how to read it. Row 1, again, look for that little hug in the center decrease, and you're going to have a yarn over on each side. Row 3, you do not have the hug, you have the center double decrease and no yarn overs. So when you put your work down and you come back to it, you can very clearly see, oh, I've only done 1 through 4 here. You can also look farther into the pattern and see that knowing the increases, the yarn over is only done on row 1 and row 3. That means you're only going to have 2 increases in the body of the pattern, not the midline, but the body. So there's row 1, there's row 3. And I can see that I finished row 4 for 2 reasons. One, because this yarn over is closed. It's worked right there. And my working yarn is ready to go on the right side. On the full pattern, you can see, if you want to count through the midline, here are your repeats. Row 1, row 1, row 1, row 1. You're repeating the lace section, lattice lace section, 3 times, right there. And then it says repeat rows 1 and 2 once more. Again, that's not the setup rows 1 and 2. That's the lattice lace 1 and 2. So there it is. When you do those repeats, you can count in the body section. Again, this is just reading your pattern. We have 1, you do any of these, 1, 2, 1, 3, rows 1, 3, rows 1, 3, row 1. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 eyelets in the body of your lace when you are looking at when you're reading your fabric. Also, the SSK, as mentioned, it's leaning to the left. That's purposeful. The knit two together is leaning to the right. A very common mistake happens at the end of the row 1 and row 3. So put down my work. I looked at it. Here I am. I can see I have just 1 hug. I can see I have 2 eyelets. That's telling me I'm starting row 1 again. Let's do it. So row 1, knit 1. And then here's your repeat. Yarn over, SSK. Yarn over, SSK. Yarn over, SSK. Oops. I always get nervous, believe it or not, when I'm knitting on camera. I can explain things on camera all day, but when I start to knit, I get nervous. Okay, we do the repeat to 3 stitches before my marker. Here we go. We're there. Yarn over, slip, knit 2 together. Whoops. Pass the slip stitch over. And this is where that muscle memory, you really kind of have to pay attention to it. We're used to dropping our marker. We're not going to drop our marker in row 1. You might even want to put a little note if you write on your pattern. You don't drop your marker in row 1. You give yourself a yarn over and then slip. And then here's the repeat for the left side of the marker. The yarn over happens after. So we knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, and then we're left with 1 stitch. It's very easy to just want to knit that stitch, but you need to remember the second half of the repeat, which is the yarn over. So it's very easy to forget that yarn over before that last stitch. That makes sense? Carol, yarn over can be off. Thanks for the thumbs up, Betsy. So after, oh, I just moved. Am I missing anything, Hen? This chat
I
keeps
think
going
we're all
up.
covered for now. Yeah.
Are we good? Okay. Opening it up to the audience, to the community, to the people. Covered a lot with the lace.
Jill,
Good. Yeah.
sorry, this is Wanda. My voice is a little hoarse. I just saw one question, which I think you missed, from Claire. She has more stitches on the left than the right, and she wasn't sure how to tell. And one thing I pointed out is your yarn tail from the front is always going to be on the left. So that's confirms that you're on the right side. But chances are she just ended up with the yarn overs, managed to move the her stitch marker to the wrong direction. Anyway, I just wanted to figure you might be able to help her with that.
Okay, thank you. So there are many reasons why the stitch count can be off. As in this lace section, which is why using that lifeline is really helpful, and also being able to see what you're looking at. Being able to read the fabric, because again, the words don't tell you what this looks like. So understanding what it looks like can be very, very helpful here. If you know that your midline is correct, but you're having way more stitches over here than over here, most likely then most likely what's happening, and again, this is an assumption without looking at your work, feel free to email me a picture. I do that all the time. You send it to knitssisu@gmail.com and I can kind of troubleshoot that way individually. You might be
Jill,
forgetting your increase on, yep.
just saw a further clarification from Claire. So she's actually not in the lace section yet.
Okay.
So I think she probably had switched which which side was the right versus wrong, but that's just a guess. So
Yeah, and that's a good point too. We kind of covered because garter is a reversible fabric, it is beneficial to take a removable stitch marker and attach it to the front, the right side of your work, so that way you know you're always looking at the right side. The purpose of that in that garter section is we're only moving our stitch marker on the right side. And so when you know that you're looking at that little reminder, you know you're working that right side, and then your stitch counts on either side will be correct if you're doing your knit front and backs correctly. And I saw message carrying
Yes,
yarn up the
I'm tagging
side.
you on some questions.
Thank you. Yeah, carrying yarn up the side. And is there a way to read the ends of the row to see if you've forgotten the knit front and back? Okay. Let's go over the knit front and back first. So the knit front and back is really great for garter because it looks like a garter stitch. So I'm knitting fronts, which is just a normal knit stitch, and then knit the back like this. What happens is it almost looks like a little purl next to, whoa, don't fall off. It almost looks like a little purl next to a normal stitch. So this is kind of the architecture of the knit front and back, which is why a lot of designers choose not to use this in stockinette, because you can see that little bar right there. So see how the normal stitch or the front stitch is kind of flush with the needle, and the back or the increase of this increase looks like that. It gives you a little bar right there. And so I'll knit the next stitch next to it so you can see it. This is a great question. This is how you read the knit front and back stitch. It almost looks like a little seed stitch in there. So you have a flush stitch, you have a flush stitch, and there is your increase right there. So to carry your yarn, I didn't do it here. I should have. So if you leave this as is, and also to mention, when I got into the lace section, I did cut my yarn. I did not carry it up, but I did carry my yarn up when I got into the even body section, because you're alternating every third row or every third garter bump, you're alternating the new color. So the best way to carry your yarn is to take the yarn that you had just used, move it off to the left, and bring the yarn that you're about to use under and up. So it kind of creates this X in the back. So I'm going to mess with my piece a little bit here. I'm not following the pattern. Pretend that I knit back. So here I am, carrying my yarn. I finished this yarn here. This yarn is coming up. It's on the bottom row. I take this yarn. If I'm going to continue using the orange, then the orange goes to the left and then under like that. If I'm going to start using the blue, then the orange goes to the left and then the blue comes up. So you're always pulling the yarn that is below, literally below, in the row below, you're pulling it up and under and then over the stitch of the yarn that you're about to use. And that's what carries the yarn all the way up. Now, there is a way to getting into that even body section, which I know is a big part of next week. There are a bunch of different ways you can play with carrying the yarn. I want to make sure I address all the lace questions though before I get into the even body. Yeah, Tracy, if you forget to move your stitch marker, it will throw off the side to side count. Antoinette, you can. I'm totally fine with that. Being able to rip instead of ripping back. You do just want to make sure that you're focusing on the stitch count on either side. In order to keep your center line in line, you want to have 3 extra stitches to the physical right versus the left of your stitch marker. Okay, so, spaces, Kathy, at the beginning and end of each row, it might just be a tension thing. Moving from that knit front and back, which increases that stitch a little bit. When you knit the next stitch, you just might want to tighten a bit. Thank you so much, Ruth. Yes, I find it's become my mission as an instructor and a designer to help knitters read the fabric because that's really I found the root of so many mistakes that we make as knitters. So I've a lot of questions about carrying the yarn.
Jill?
Let's go. Yes.
Hi. We have someone in the chat that has a tip for counting the stitches on the lace, and they want to share it.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm
It
not
looks
sure
like
their name.
So this is
SMM.
Sue. I didn't know if you just wanted people popping in, but what I found really helpful because the lace, and I consider myself kind of an intermediate knitter, but I haven't done lace, and those yarn overs were hard to keep track of, and sometimes they fell. So what I found is I counted on the wrong side row, and I noticed that all the yarn overs were odd numbers. So if I turned and I started 1, 2, 3, number 3 was supposed to be the yarn over. If it wasn't, that told me that I forgot my knit front and back. And then as I went across, I'd occasionally find where a yarn over maybe dropped. And I wouldn't have noticed that if I just knit across. So that helped me catch the error within that row and was able to fix it.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's really makes us so much more confident in our craft when we are able to become intimate with what we're creating and really trusting what we're creating. um, it sounds silly, but I do want to emphasize that word like intimate. We really become engaged with what it is that we are making with our hands and being able to pick up on those details of reading what you're doing to help give you stop signs. Knitting is very structured. I mean, some things will kind of throw us for a loop every now and again. Some patterns may be more intuitive than others. But knitting in general does give us a very like that something to connect to in this very personal way. So can I move on real quick? I noticed the time, but I do just want to talk about the even body section and what to look forward to for next week. So after we get past our lace repeats, so you will have 1, 2, 3 repeats, you will be entering the bulk of the shawl, which is garter. Which I love actually. If I could knit one stitch or one fabric for the rest of my knitting life, it would be garter stitch. It's reversible, it's squishy, it's fun to play with. And what we're going to be doing in this section, and so what to watch out for structurally, is we're keeping that same movement of the knit front and back on the right side, center line staying the same, whatever two stitch decrease you're using, that stays the same. But then at the end, and this is where a common mistake, maybe put a little highlight in your note here, you're in muscle memory, again, of doing an increase at the end of the right side row, and you're not going to. Let me just double check my words here. Yep, knit to end. So if you're looking at the even body section, you don't have that knit front and back at the end. You're just going to stop. You're going to turn around, another muscle memory in row 2. You're used to doing a knit front and back throughout on the wrong side, and you're not going to. So you're actually not decreasing. It looks like a decrease because our fabric is moving, but you're not. The decrease happens still in your center line. You're just not increasing as you come back. So with this, I do keep my yarn attached, and I played around with a few different ways to make it look pretty. Last week, we talked a lot about edging, and I did have many questions and posted on the Facebook group about like adding an I-cord or a slipped edge. Totally fine. I did not do it here. And you can see, you know, some of my floats as I was figuring out the best way to attach. And I figured it out kind of close to the end here, a way to get a very structured and attractive and flexible carry out of my 2 colors. So let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. For every row, I'll zoom in a little bit. For every, yes, an I-cord edge would look good, but you do have to add stitches. So check the Facebook group or last week's Zoom for that one. What I like about this edge, and when playing around with different types of carries, the one that I found worked the best was on that knit front and back at the beginning of the right side row. I knit the front with one color. I knit the back double-stranded. And then I continued with the color that I was supposed to use, or yeah, supposed to use in the pattern. And then what that did was it automatically carried up the yarn, but it didn't carry it on the edge. It didn't carry it on the last stitch, because when I was carrying it on the last stitch, I got the bar, and I didn't care for that. I mean, it doesn't do anything, but it got the bar. So when I carry it and knit it in as a double-stranded stitch on my back stitch of my knit front and back, I was able to bring the yarn up with me. Pretend I finished the row. Oops. Like that. And then you can do one of 2 things. Remember, this double-stranded stitch is 1 stitch. It's not 2. So you're just going to knit that. Or if you want to keep the way it looks as a double-stranded stitch for your brain, to remember that's always a double-stranded, you can knit it double-stranded, bring the other color back. I'd prefer not to do that, but it is an option. I had that come up, so I wanted to show it. You can knit that double-stranded stitch, and then the last stitch is a knit front and back, like that. And so it keeps your yarn attached. This looks very bright. It doesn't come off that obvious when knitting in the pattern. And we will definitely go over more ways of carrying next week. But just to show you one more time, so you knit the front, knit the back double-stranded, and then continue on with one color, whatever that color may be. Next week, we will also talk about what comes up in knitting. because I guarantee you, and if you've ever worked a section that has a lot of the same stitch, your mind wanders. And it's kind of cool, but it can also be surprising at the same time. So we're going to dive into my background in brain development and neurology. I'm not joking. And talk about what comes up in knitting and how to really love, 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 love a section like this where you're continuing doing the same stitch over and over and over, and how to find so much comfort and so much ease in doing a section like this. So, any final thoughts, feelings? Thank you for the hearts. Oh, thank you, Kathy. This is the friendship sweater using Dos Tier. Oh no, Arroyo. No, Dos Tierras. This is Dos Tierras yarn, the alpaca yarn. Yeah. Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Feel free to ask questions throughout the week, email through Facebook group, and I'll see you on the other side.